So I'm calling in today from Harry S. Truman Building, the State Department headquarters here in Washington, D.C. A little bit on my background. I started in the private sector with Turner Construction in Boston, and went into the Peace Corps and served as the chief engineer for the Honair Town Council in Solomon Islands, and then ended up spending about another 5-6 years working for an Australian engineering company, working throughout the South Pacific. So my interest in and love of asset management really started there. If you ever worked in a harsh environment like that with the heat and the humidity and the salt, then you come to appreciate taking care of things and what you need to do, and be mindful of life cycles, which are extremely short there. Moved on from that and spent most of my career overseas managing facilities, about a dozen locations around the world. I've probably been to 50 or 60 other embassies as well, and managed anything from, for other small locations in Nicaragua to our largest embassies in Afghanistan and Iraq. So really interesting experience doing that. And again, depending on the location, it became super important to take care of our assets. And in those situations, I was really on the end of the food chain, right? I wasn't involved in the design, or the construction of them, but I received these facilities, and I can't say that they're always in ideal condition for longevity and for what we're doing. So you come to appreciate, hey, this is something that really should be a team effort. Everybody should be in the tent right from the beginning. So that kind of bred a lot of things in me. I came back to DC and ran the facility management office for overseas buildings operations, 280 posts around the world, and really started pushing in on moving towards a real, life cycle cost management, total cost of ownership, looking at some ISO at that point, and really trying to move the organization in that direction in that holistic, comprehensive way. And now I've moved over to A Bureau, the Administration Bureau here, which manages the department's domestic portfolio, which is in about 150 locations. 80% of those are in the National Capital Region, about 10 million square feet. And they, most of them consist of GSA, full service leases, and about 17 or 18 DOS owned or delegated properties in their offices and warehouses, data centers, training facilities, diplomatic security field offices, consular passport agencies, and the like. So really interesting, I think, having the experience in both domestically and overseas and in a whole bunch of different working environments has been really instructive as to why I value asset management so much and really want to see it instituted in a holistic way for the Department of State. So, for us, I think like anyone, I'll read out some of what our challenges are. They shouldn't be much different from anybody else's. But as Bob well knows, the number one thing on my hit list is silos. I cannot stand stovepiping. I think it's our number one threat, really to any organization. It differs a little bit from what Peter was saying, about specialists. Now talking about that, it's groups that kind of keep their data to themselves and aren't willing to share, and that's the difficulty, right? If we're working with blinders on and we're not looking at the full picture, then we're missing a good show. And that's been, I think, one of the greatest frustrations for me in my career is just not enough of us really looking at that and saying that we can be so much bigger, so much better, so much farther along if we work together, right? And anything information I have, I'm very willing, to share with anyone else. So that's one thing. I mean, not considering the tail. So we do things up front, and we're not really considering what are going to be the long-term repercussions or ramifications of those decisions we make, early on in that. So that's a problem. Lack of data, and we've talked about that before, and not having the data, not using performance metrics or analytics to do our job. Become out of touch with industry, right? And probably like many of you out here, I've heard it that we're special, we're different, we can't do it like anybody else. There's no way. That's not true. That's not true from any place I've ever worked, but it is a great excuse that people continue to use. And human capital side of it, right? This is one that is tough for all of us. Is we need to make sure that we're doing succession planning. We need to make sure that we continually train, have people with the right skills and certifications, so that we can continue to do it and change as technology changes, as our world changes. We can do it. issues with either flat or reduced budgets. And, you know, for us domestically, we deal with a single year appropriation, which I don't really know how you do real property asset management with single year appropriations. I mean, you better have all your information really well packed, you know, really well together, and can forecast, you know, well out to do something like that. And I can't say that we're there yet. So yeah, I think a lot of that results in kind of a reactive, on your heels approach, which, you know, is not effective and not cost efficient, and it really puts a high level of stress on everybody, right? If you're coming in and you're not quite sure what you're doing, and you're always reacting to, you know, waiting for that next shoe to drop, that's a tough way to manage facilities. So sometimes it can feel like you're in you're in a sinking ship and you got a Dixie cup. You got a small little Dixie cup that you're trying to bail with. So a lot of frustration in those ends. So those are some of the things, you know, that we see and that we're dealing with it. So what are we trying to do? We've created a real property asset management program, an RPAM program initiative. And, you know, it's in accordance with federal mandates and incorporating, you know, best industry practices. And so it really constitutes a clear vision and true cradle to grave real property stewardship in a holistic, comprehensive, collaborative, communicative, transparent, and accountable manner. So that's not really something that fits on a bumper sticker really well, but every single one of those words is important, right? When you're trying to move in this direction, everything matters in that one. And so that's what we are trying to do. So moving from that siloed, stovepipe, personality-driven, ad hoc approach to a more standardized, programmatic, data-driven business model is where we're going. So, you know, it's been great. OMB, Amelia was on earlier, and I like when we kind of get pushed into doing it. I think sometimes if we were left to our own devices, we're not going to do this. So it's not bad to get a shove. So I was really excited to see, you know, OMB's M23 and M2010 directives going out on real property capital planning, kind of forces in the right direction. And for me, as Bob well knows as well, I walk around with a box of publications that go back, and starting with Executive Order 13327. I mean, I really think the end of the 1990s and the early 2000s was the heyday of asset management. So, you know, I've got my national academies and you know, the publications from Predicting Outcomes of Investments in M&R and, you know, Pay Now or Pay Later, KPIs, Committing to TCO. I mean, great stuff. I mean, the stuff that is absolutely as relevant today as when it was first published. And, you know, I always think the funniest thing, it's not funny, it's a little bit sad, is that, you know, we've had all this information at our fingertips, you know, for 20 years or more. And in, you know, far too many of our you know, organizations, we've only enacted about, you know, 20 or 30%. And, you know, I look at myself and I say, how is that possible? Right? I mean, somebody's actually told you what you need to do. Here's the 20 things you need to do to have a, you know, functioning and effective real property asset management program, and you don't do them. So, and then you just wonder, why aren't we doing better? Why don't we have the, you know, it's the writing couldn't be any clearer on the wall. So, so that's something that we're kind of dealing with, saying, you know, we're going back to the basics. We're going to go back to kind of really the foundational principles about how we provide stewardship, and it's exciting, right? And so fortunately we have ISO 55000, which now we've adopted as the framework. So, and we look at it as our 6 large cabinets, and we have 39 cubby holes within those cabinets. And, you know, it's not the only thing we do, but it gives us a framework, right? It takes my personality and else's personality out of it, saying, you know, it's not telling you what to do, but it's saying these are all the things that you need to have in order to have a true program. And then from there, this is from private sector, DOD, university, state, and local governments, because we've learned so much over these decades, right? And there's absolutely no reason, you know, to recreate wheels that have long been established and lessons learned that you can simply implement. So, you know, obviously starting to develop KPIs and what we'll call developmental KPIs, right? Depends on the level of maturity of your organization. And so as we're kind of in that shallow end of the pool, if you will, you know, those will be some of the basic things: availability of systems, planned versus unplanned. Some of the other things, just to kind of get going, get that feeling. we're starting to collect the data to see how we're doing and eventually evolve as the organization matures. We're fortunate to have leadership buy-in. So we've been able to get that RPAM policy approved by our assistant secretary and undersecretary for management. So now, now we have this overriding umbrella and there's nothing stopping us, right? And a lot of times there's just too much bureaucracy and we can't get it going. But, we're trying to kind of cut through the red tape on that and say, okay, no, we got it now, but now we got to go. And, how do we go? We have to, it's really nothing short than a culture change and a complete organizational transformation, because it's just not how we've been doing it, things in the past. And no one in particular is to blame. It's the way it is. And I think anyone would say there's no organization that does this perfectly, right? But we need to identify and break down each of those silos. We need to integrate. We need to communicate. We need to coordinate. And in doing so, we start to learn. Our blinders come off and we start to look at the big picture. So we have kind of 5 components that we're looking at, which is portfolio management, operations and maintenance delivery, project management, customer service, and RPAM project implementation itself. So, it starts with doing that gap analysis. You got to know where you are to baseline that. And so, as Bob knows, it's been incredibly helpful for us to start to get snapshots of our sites for which we have ownership or delegation, and taking initial shots, through data that we have and through parametrics to kind of give a picture of where we are and what are some of the risks that we face, so that we can kind of start to put good plans together. So we've got about 30 tasks that we're working on that we're trying to get done in this next 6-month period. COVID's made it interesting for us, so we do a lot through Teams and shared documents going through that. And that was kind of a transition, right? I mean, I'm a in-person whiteboard person. And so kind of moving in this direction has been a challenge, but now everybody's getting pretty comfortable with it and we can have a document where everybody's, actually editing at the same time. And we seem to get a lot done. So I think the key is we want movement, right? So, potential versus kinetic energy, hard to kind of get started. But once you get started, it's a lot easier to course correct. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. It may be 60 or 70% solutions, but they're enough to get going with. And as we go forward, we'll get those lessons learned and we will make those corrections to get better and better at what we're doing. So it's kind of this, there should be a feeling of urgency, right? I mean, I feel it every day coming in. If it's ever going to be done, it needs to be done now, right? And we're the people to do it. So let's get at it. But that being said, we don't work in a vacuum, right? I mean, from what Chris is doing, from what Peter's doing, what so much of us are doing across the industry, we've got to stay connected. We've got to share these experiences about what's working, what's not working. And so I really look forward to us, really becoming a part of that, becoming a much more vibrant part of the industry and not an anomaly, right? That's not going to get us anywhere. So that's kind of the direction that we're moving. Standardized processes and templates for facility condition, inspections that will now become, a mandatory requirement, validating, as Peter's saying, you got to have an inventory, right? I think Chris saying the same thing. It all starts with a valid and accurate inventory, and also what the condition is, right? I mean, how do you plan if you don't know what you have, right? It doesn't even make any sense. So, defining nomenclature and establishing data management standards is absolutely important, right? We want to deal with things that are drop-down menus, that we actually speak the same language, and one term means the same to everyone, and it doesn't have 6 or 7 different uses. So part of our thing now is to actually speak the same language, which is something new for us as well. I think it's important as we look at our people at our locations that this concept of ownership, right? That if I'm in charge of a site in Charleston, or I'm in Colorado, wherever I may be, or I'm in Ouagadougou overseas, that as the facility manager, I take ownership of my site. I know everything. I'm passionate. My management of that facility is visceral, right? And it's that type of ownership that we really got to feel, because when we do so, we really take everything personally about what we do, and we make sure that we have the information we need to do our jobs, to protect our people, and to protect our physical assets. So the next thing we're doing is looking at a communications plan, right? We need to be able to communicate internally so people understand not just what we're doing, but more importantly, why we're doing it. why is this going to be not just a benefit to the organization as a whole, but why is it going to benefit, you individually, right? And if we do this right, everyone does benefit by virtue of moving, in this direction. So we've done, a lot of work in that and doing initial, placemats for our sites and doing some parametrics. So it helps. It helps us kind of tell a good story. Like the other speakers, we use Maximo on that one. We had to kind of configure it in a certain way to do a certain thing. I think we realized that we want to move it in a little bit different direction. So we're starting a new pilot that really is kind of focused on customer service and stewardship of that facility, right? We, like probably many, we outsource a lot of our O&M. I've worked in both systems, from in-house staff to outsourced. Both approaches can work, but they require different things and different skill sets, right? So if you're outsourcing, then you have to have a very strong contract administration structure, and you need to have quality assurance and surveillance plans, and you really need to be on top of your metrics. So, in that case, we're working on it. We're looking at our portfolio across the board and putting together that strategic capital plan, right? And kind of set criteria for why one group is here versus somewhere else, and what is it that needs to be in this headquarters building, for instance, as opposed to somewhere that's out 2 or 3 layers, past the beltway. So a lot of these things are going to be important because we want to make sure that, we still produce the value and we get the right people in the right place, at the right cost, and in the right condition. So by virtue of our efforts, we've been fortunate to get approval through our through VP and OMB of 17 million. Hopefully that will come. We're on a CR right now, and we'll see what happens. But the idea that we would start to get an augmentation to our base for deferred maintenance and repairs, and that's kind of the first time that we've had that. We're very incredibly appreciative of it. We want to make sure that we make the very best use of every cent of that, which means, again, having a proactive plan, being able to forecast forward to know exactly what we're going to do. There's any number of challenges, but I am actually optimistic about the future, right? And I'm optimistic because it's something that we're all working on, and if we work on it together, we're going to get farther faster. And so, we can work and share base documents, and we can, it's always easier to edit than draft from scratch. And as Bob knows, I say to all people all the time, if you're writing something from scratch, you're already wrong, right? You're wrong, right? There isn't anything that we are trying to do that hasn't been done already in one way, shape, or form. So let's work as a team across the industry, share things that we have so that we can help each other go there. That's what I have to share today. I'm actually happy to answer questions. I do want to give a shout out to some of our team members, Lisa Kirienko and Deborah Schneider and Alex Rayleigh and Tara Lawson and a host of others. And of course, Bob, Eric, and Emily from the Wolper team, who are really, helping us to stay on track with this. So thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here today.